steering is one of those things. If you're a Bronco owner, you have cursed your truck. I mean, I got my steering pretty dialed in a while ago, and then I did more upgrades, and now it's terrible. Like, even, when I just kind of rock my steering wheel back and forth, my body will move over my tires.
Yeah, we just got one in a couple weeks ago, and first thing we do is check the steering.
Yeah.
Someone looks underneath the front, and the steering box was rolling over from one side to the next. And there's 3 bolts there, and the bolts were the wrong diameter shaft. So, and then they were loose; they weren't even tight. So it's just a matter of time,
It's one of those things that you have to learn. You have to become the expert with steering. And they sell a whole kit, and I think it's $1,500, which seems like a lot. But if you don't have power steering, you do the whole kit. It has the power steering pump, the power steering box, a new steering shaft, because if you get in a head-on collision, there's a chance that thing can shoot up because it's a solid piece of steel.
A spear.
Yeah. Here we are, another BronCast episode number 3. What'd you do this week? You do anything recently?
Well, I did. I got to go somewhere this week because you picked me up and you took me. And we got to do an awesome club drive in your Bronco, which runs unlike my old one.
Yeah, yeah, that was pretty fun. We did here in Nashville. There isn't much wheeling around, but there's a couple unpaved gravel country roads that have become popular called the Dirt Devil Trail. And how many Broncos would you say came? 15?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And amazingly, 5 or 6 Gen 6s, which was really cool to see Gen 6 hanging out and doing the trails with Gen 1s. That meant a lot to me.
Yeah. I was nervous the whole time because I don't care about getting scratches on my Bronco or a rock flying up and, dinging the paint or anything like that. But I'm thinking, oh my gosh, all these new Bronco owners who are like following behind me, like a rock's going to fly up and chip their paint or ding their windshield. And
get
I'm
a
like,
pinstripe.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, everyone seemed super cool. A couple people came from Knoxville. We have in Nashville, we have a Tennessee Bronco Club. It's basically a Facebook group that we're all a part of. And so that's kind of, if you're in the Tennessee area, definitely join that. Because we do meetups every couple months. So yeah, recently we did the drive down the trail. It was fun.
And you got to work on your Bronco too.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. I, on the trail, realized, it kept shutting off. I kept losing fuel. And, I was like, I need to I told Donnie, he hopped in with me and, it shuts off and I'm like, I need to figure out a couple more things. And, but yeah, it turned off while we were on the trail. Like we had just driven through a creek and, which you're allowed to do because creeks are, where the trail goes, you can drive through creeks legally.
Yeah, it was a crossing.
Yeah. And so I just crossed through a creek and then it turned off and I was like, oh man, and it wouldn't turn back on. So we were just kind of doing a quick troubleshoot right there on the trail and realized that one of my relays had gone bad for my fuel pump. And so easy fix. I ordered a new relay. So I'll put that in. But yeah, it's always something. And I'm usually the one, I'm usually the guy on the trail that has something go wrong. And actually Matt, the guy who runs the Tennessee Bronco Club, he didn't have a front drive shaft.
It was a Bluetooth drive shaft, I think is what he said.
Bluetooth drive shaft. Yeah, so that was a good time. Good time for sure. Well, let's kick it off, man. A little DIY or PAY.
Yeah, we were going to pick up on the inspection things that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe this time do steering inspections.
We've
been doing a lot of steering work here. And so we can talk about, not just things to look for, but upgrades you can do also.
Yeah. Yeah. Steering is one of those things. If you're a Bronco owner, you have cursed your truck for steering poorly at some point. And it's one of those things too that, I mean, I got my steering pretty dialed in a while ago, and then I did more upgrades, and now it's terrible. So it's like, it's one of those things that you have to learn. You have to become the expert with steering. So even though I would pay people to do some stuff, I think if as a Bronco owner, you have to DIY it or you're going to hate life for a long time.
Yeah. So. Usually most guys, if they've got a Bronco, the steering's worn out, they can turn the steering wheel from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
And maybe nothing happens, or the front levitates left to right over the wheels instead of the wheels turning.
Yep.
Which is worn out parts.
Yeah.
Mostly.
That is mine right now because of worn out bushings, but I'll get to that in a second. So starting from the outside and working your way in, when we're talking about steering, the first thing that I tell people that they need to look at is their tire pressure, because, the rating, the PSI rating on your tire is an average rating for a truck. So when you're putting 35-inch tires, or 33-inch tires, bigger tires on your Bronco is pretty light. And the weight of that Bronco isn't, accurate to the PSI rating on the tire. So one of the things that you want to look at is what pressure is my tire going to create the best traction tire patch on the road. And for my Bronco, it's about 25 PSI, which is way under the recommended 33 PSI. And so, but it's one of those things where you just kind of have to test what your tire pressure is. If your tire is too full, then the tire patch rounds out and you just drive on the middle, the inside of the tire, middle part of the tire. If your tire is too low, then you're literally, just kind of floating around on the sidewall and getting way too much flex out of the tire. So it's finding that middle ground with the tire. Now, the next one, moving in, is you want to check ball joints. One of the things that we do is, you have a buddy get under the Bronco or look at all the steering components up front, and then someone else get in the truck and actually crank the steering wheel back and forth and I do it with the engine running and with it off, do both. But with the engine running, if you have a power steering setup, the power steering pump going, then you can really see what everything is doing. I literally did this yesterday, 2 days ago, after our drive. I set up my camera and with my engine running, filmed my steering components as I was cranking the steering wheel back and forth. And the first thing you want to look at is your ball joints. So those are the ones that go in the knuckle. And you want to see if they're moving. Those ball joints should be tight enough that when you turn, the ball joint doesn't move, but it moves the knuckle. And then going in from there, you want to be looking at your bushings. So you got a bushing at your track bar, at the top and the bottom of your track bar, one that attaches to the frame and to the axle. You've got a bushing, your C bushings that go on your radius arm caps and your radius arms that attach to the axle. And you got a couple more bushings in there as well. And so you want to be looking at those bushings and seeing if there's any movement. And where I had movement, I told you I was just doing this, was on my track bar. The bushings that keep it on the frame, it's such a small amount of movement, but you can feel it so much in the truck. And you even, when I just kind of rock my steering wheel back and forth, my body will move over my tires. It's not even. If
you think about it, the straight axle with the coil springs, what's really holding the axle underneath the truck is that track bar keeps it from going left and right, so that's usually when those wear out, you get that levitation that we talked about left or right.
And it's pretty dramatic for how I put new bushings on there just not a few months ago, but a few years ago. But here's the thing. I've had a ton of oil leaks. I've had, stuff that I work on that truck all the time. And so I'm always messing stuff up under it. And so that bushing in particular has been soaked in oil, when I swapped my power steering box and didn't realize that I shouldn't unplug the lines first in the install process, because then as I was working on everything else, like power steering fluids leaking all over the frame. So that bushing in particular has gotten beat up with oil and probably worn down more than it should. Yeah, so then moving on, thing to check, your tie rod and drag link. We were talking about the track bar. You want your drag link and your track bar to be kind of parallel with each other. That's another thing, because what's happening when you're flexing, when your suspension is flexing and going over stuff, is that drag link and that track bar are trying to hold the axle in place and keep the steering at the right angle. So the closer, more parallel those two can be, not parallel to the ground, but parallel to each other, they're at an angle. Keeping those parallel will keep your axle moving together. It kind of eliminates some bump steer and some issues like that. And then the last thing to check is a steering box, which I was just talking about. I replaced mine. And that steering box, mine was super worn out. I had 3 inches of play on my steering wheel before the steering box would even engage. And so that's a thing to check. I would not recommend tightening your steering box as a first check. But yeah.
Yeah, we just got one in a couple weeks ago, and first thing we do is check the steering.
Yeah.
Someone looks underneath the front, and the steering box was rolling over from one side to the next. And there's 3 bolts there, and the bolts were the wrong diameter shaft. So, and then they were loose; they weren't even tight. So it's just a matter of time, the box needed a replace. Also, it was all worn out. As a result of that, it was getting abused. So luckily though, the frame and the holes were okay. We were able to stick through the bolts that just slide through those sleeves, and and put a new box, new pitman arm.
Yeah. Sometimes I've heard people who, when they take their box off, their frame is actually cracked right there. And so I know that there's companies that will make a little frame reinforcement plate that you can put behind the box to just help kind of keep the structure of the frame intact and help keep your frame from letting your steering box move around.
Well, and if you want to consider an upgrade and you want to go to a Heim joint system instead of like ball joints, there's a Heim joint kind of looks like your wrist when you make a fist, and it's a ball joint. It's all steel. There's no play in it. So when you set your geometry in your truck and you just thread those, left or right, depending on which ends it's on, and you lock those in, you're setting the geometry for the front end, and everything gets really tight at that point, and things don't move.
Yeah.
This is solid steel, a solid steel ball in the middle with a hole through the center for the bolt. And the instructions on those kits, when you get them, it says to check all of your mounts, and you really need to grind them all off, get the dirt off, clean them off, hit them with a wire brush, and inspect those and make sure that there's no cracks. So, when you are going through your suspension, it's super important. The vehicle's almost 40 years or 50 years old. You want to check all of those. Don't just throw suspension on it, and make sure that, because, once you switch to something like a Heim joint, that steel's really thick.
Yeah.
So, you want to make sure you're not going to peel off a bracket.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I have a Heim joint system on my 75, and I love it. Super strong, great quality. Really, really, really enjoy it. But yeah, we went knuckle over. So that's a whole other thing. Knuckle under, knuckle over, where you move the geometry of the suspension up as you do a lift and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot with that.
Explain why you would want to do it one way versus the other.
Knuckle under is how the Broncos came, which knuckle under just means that your tie rod goes from knuckle to knuckle at the front of your Bronco, and it sits under just where
on the spindle.
On the spindle, yeah, where it goes there on the knuckle, and when you move it over, it takes a little bit more effort because your knuckle is actually tapered, and so that ball joint that sits in there gets fatter at the bottom. So you can't just flip it upside down and like pound it in place. You actually have to drill out your knuckles, make sure they fit, and put a sleeve, then re-sleeve the knuckle so it fits right. But yeah, what that does is it gives you a better approach angle if you're ever going off-roading, which your approach angle is just when you're coming up to an obstacle, at what point do your tires touch before at what point do your tires touch versus your bumper. So that's basically your approach angle, really dumbed down without being able to show anything. But yeah, that moving that tie rod up gives you a better approach angle when you're off-roading, and it changes the geometry when you have a lift to actually, if you think about, I got a 3-inch lift. Well, now if I put my tie rod knuckle over, then I kind of get that geometry back by putting the tie rod 3 inches higher. So there's a lot that goes into it, but that's kind of the reason that you would do it. And it definitely will help with steering issues when you're lifting your truck and putting big tires on it.
So how do you feel about damper, no damper?
I don't run a damper because I feel like it hides any issues that you have. So yes, like it can totally, give you a smoother ride. But I feel like if you have issues in your steering, then that damper is going to hide it, and it's going to make it harder for you to troubleshoot it. So if you're trying to troubleshoot your steering, the first thing you should do is remove that damper, which is just a shock up front that connects the frame to the drag link, and just kind of adds some additional damper shock to your steering system so that if you're having an issue, then it doesn't show up as much.
Well, on old Broncos, if all your steering's worn out, your damper's worn out too.
Totally.
It's leaking all over the place. It's blown out.
The guy that I bought my Bronco from, like the steering was just trashed. And I'm driving around. He goes, "Oh yeah, no, you just need a new spring, or you need a new shock up front, and it'll drive great." Yeah, he totally was lying to me. But now I know the truth that is not the case. But yeah. Well, hey, I'm gonna pull an audible here because we've been talking about steering. Let's talk about our parts corner, because my first part today, based on what we've been talking about, is actually the Tom's Bronco Parts, Tom's Off-Road power steering kit. And I was telling you, I installed a new steering box on my 75. Man, the steering box, I did a couple videos about it on YouTube as well, but the steering box that Tom's has, it's their own design kind of thing. It's not a Borgeson, it's not a Delphi box. It's like their own thing. It was a perfect fit in the Bronco. Pulled my old power steering box out, dropped this new one in, and it fit perfect. Didn't have to change a thing, didn't have to move bolt holes, didn't have to get, nothing. It was perfect. And they sell a whole kit, and I think it's $1,500, which seems like a lot, but if you don't have power steering, you do the whole kit. It has the power steering pump, the power steering box, a new steering shaft, all the hoses, and I think that might have been it, but it's like, it has everything. The new box is $1,000. So you're paying, $500 extra for the conversion kit. And it is a great conversion. And I've also done the Saginaw pump, and it has the conversion has the Saginaw pump. It's just a really cool kit. And like I said, I had a ton of play in my steering box, and man, I put the Tom's Off-Road box in, and it is smooth as butter. It's responsive, but it feels like a modern car, but not a sports car. You know, it's a 4-turn box instead of a 6-turn box, but it just feels really nice when you're turning the wheel.
Didn't you do a shaft also?
Yep.
Steering column shaft.
Mm-hmm. Because the stock steering column shaft, that steering shaft, is dangerous. One, because if you get in a head-on collision, there's a chance that thing can shoot up. Because it's a solid piece of steel.
A spear.
Yeah. And spear you in half. So the new ones are made to kind of break in the middle. But it's also telescoping, so it expands and retracts. The reason I got it was actually because I put a body lift on my Bronco, and after I did the body lift, my steering shaft wouldn't fit.
Right.
So, which happens, part of, you make one change and you have to change 7 other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a body lift is an easy way to go.
Yeah. So, parts corner. Do you have a part?
Yeah, we've been installing some EFI systems in the shop. We have these Broncos that they don't steer, they don't stop. Well, they don't start either. And that seems to be your 3 problems you'll have with the Bronco if it's 50 years old. And we found the last 2 we've done were Holley's Sniper EFI systems, and just how easy they are to install. They've got some really neat features with them. They have the control unit, or the brain that runs the EFI is actually mounted into the front of the casting of the unit. So you don't have a separate box to mount somewhere else inside your truck or something like that. And they're kind of neat. You can get them in like this traditional bronze, which looks like the pot metal, sort of a gold, black or silver, maybe even polished. But yeah, so really it's almost plug and play. That's, like doing your body lift. If you do an EFI system, it's not like just switching a carburetor out. Now you've increased a fuel pressurized system, so you got to do in-tank pumps, and you end up wiring all the way back to the fuel tanks. But you do get a controller, and it just walks you through what engine you have. Do you have a camshaft? Things like that, and then it's learning. So as the truck's running, it eventually understands how the engine runs and takes in ambient conditions and things like that. So for people that have their Bronco and they may only drive it once a month, or it may sit somewhere for 3 to 6 months, you can jump in, it'll just start right up.
Yeah.
You don't have to touch the throttle pedal. You just let the EFI do all the work, and but yeah, it's really neat. Really enjoy installing those because there's like really 4 wires that you have to wire in.
How many wrenches would you say it is to install that?
I'm gonna go with 4.
Yeah.
At least, yeah. But the instructions are terrific. Holley has a great call-in line. They can walk you through it. You realize your Bronco's super basic.
Yeah.
So you're really updating it. But I think the thing I like about their EFI systems, you can get a 2-barrel or a 4-barrel, but the 2-barrel unit is good up to 350 horsepower.
Yeah. And
it produces like linear power. It makes the truck super easy to drive. You don't have like this big 4-barrel coming in, when you stomp it. And, so it just, the drivability is probably the thing I like the most about EFI in general.
Yep. Yeah. I love those kits, and I think they're great little kits and super easy to install, but I will agree, easy for me because I've installed a couple of them, but I would definitely, that's one that I would pay someone to do if I was, encouraging someone to go that route. So, yeah, that's a good one.
Our question today is from an email we received. It says, "Hey guys, love the podcast. I just bought a 2022 Ford Bronco Badlands Sasquatch. Should I put bigger tires on it or just run it like it is? Any lift recommendations?"
That's a good question. We talked about this a little bit in the last episode too, with your Donnie's getting a big lift put on his new Bronco as well. I like a little bit of a lift. I think a 4-door with 37s are like the perfect lift tire combo. But suspension lift, I don't know. What do you think about this? Suspension lift, I would say know what you're going to do with it. Like, there's no reason to pay for a $10,000 suspension lift if it's never going to see the trail.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And it does, I think 2 inches makes a big difference on the 2-door or the 4-door, but on the 4-door, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
It really makes it stand out. But whether it's a Gen 1 or a Gen 6, like before you buy a lift kit, how are you going to use it? And I am getting 37s, and it's going to have a lift.
It'll look
so sick. Yeah.
I like it. Yeah.
And a ladder.
Yeah. Well, good question. Thank you so much to the person who sent that in. If you have any questions, make sure to email us at questions@thebroncast.com. That is questions@thebroncast.com. All right, Donnie, I want to hear some more history. We've been talking about the leading up to the Bronco really coming out, and you've been giving us some sweet history lessons. What are we talking about today?
Well, we left off with just about to finish the development of the Bronco. We talked about that clay model that they made, and $10 million was set aside to start.
Yeah, the marketing department.
Here you go. Yeah, and the marketing department jumps in.
Finance department.
They had a project name for the Bronco the whole time, and it was called Goes Over All Terrain. It's like, you engineers, that's genius. So if you actually think about it, it's GOAT.
Yeah,
Goes Over All Terrain.
Yeah.
And there was already a GTO on the market, a car. So what's interesting is they're like, okay, well, that's the code name, and the marketing department steps in and says, how are we going to position this and brand it? And what's really cool is they decided it was going to be the 4-wheel drive sports car, and the Mustang's bigger, bolder, tougher brother, and that's it's like another horse in the stable is what they went with, which is nobody, who's going to buy a goat.
Right. But what I love about that is even, we talk about the Gen 6 often. Like, I love that the Generation 6 brought in some of the GOAT, with the GOAT modes that go over all terrain. And I just think it's cool little pieces of history that connect, even the new one to the history of the old one. Sorry, I interrupted you, but.
No, yeah, like that was funny on our trail drive this weekend. The guy's like, for all you guys with GOAT mode, you could just flip a knob without even.
Yeah. If we
your sandals off.
Yeah, if we need 4-wheel drive, we have to get out and lock the hubs.
That's
and
right.
Put it into 4-wheel low or whatever.
While you're knee deep in something. Yeah. That was really the positioning. It was brilliant by the marketing department to do that, to pair it with the Mustang, because the Mustang had this tremendous success. I mean, a lot of people initially, when the Bronco was released, they sold the first year around 20,000 of the Broncos, which, you and I are sitting here going, oh, that's terrific. Well, on the first day, the year before, when the Mustang was released, they sold 20,000 Mustangs on the first day.
On the first day.
Yeah. So, it was not considered a success, but they also knew the market was only, 40,000 units. So the expectation wasn't, to set the world on fire, but to grow that market. And it was pretty cool. So it was supposed to be the sporty off-road 4-wheel drive to pair it with the success of the Mustang. So it really was the first sports utility vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, like even the marketing that they've talked about, it talks about how, the sporty utility vehicle or something like that, and it's like, I don't know, the commercial where it's driving through the lake or the river, the creek, whatever it is, and it's like the sporty utility vehicle. It's like, man, you not only are you launching a new product, but you're having to change the market to really accept a new product. It's pretty big undertaking.
Well, I really think it was successful, tying it to the Mustang. The commercial is fantastic. If you've never heard the commercial, I love it. You can catch it on YouTube. It's just early Bronco Ford commercial, and you can find it. And the music's great. It's practically black and white. It's it's just awesome.
It really is, and it's like, all these epic shots, like, you know, of the Bronco just doing stuff and then cruising down the road, you know, and just it's a pretty epic commercial when you watch it. But it's cool, like, you know, talking about the Gen 6, like I feel like the Gen 6 launch took a lot of inspiration from that, you know, and it's like it felt like that 1966 commercial felt like the launch video, that 10-minute launch video from Ford. You know, it's like just out there, you know, having fun, going off road, driving down the road. Like, it was pretty awesome.
I would love to see Ford tie that commercial into anything new that they do, just because, you know, that is where the Bronco came from.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's some pretty cool Bronco history there. Thank you guys so much for listening. That is another BronCast with Jon and Donnie. Stick around. Next time, it's going to be great as well.
Yeah, see you next time.